Zoya is in the hospital in Miami because medical professionals discovered a black hole forming within her chest. She only has a week to live because there is no treatment for it. In order for Zoya to spend her final days with her family, the physicians order her husband Donald, daughter Jane, and son-in-law to bring her home. The family tries to divert Zoya's attention with music and talk on the way home, but she is engrossed in her own thoughts. She isn't invalid, and they keep trying to make accommodations for her, but she just gets irritated. The pair visits the publishers who have handled all of the couple's science book publishing the following day, but they simply assume Zoya will recover, and still want to talk about the final chapter of her unfinished book. They then make an appointment with the family lawyer to handle the will and any other documents that will be required when the time comes. In an attempt to help Zoya decompress, the family also brings her to the beach and a massage parlor, but to little effect. After a while, Zoya goes to see her mother Sandra in the retirement community, but Sandra merely ever watches TV and never speaks. Zoya goes outside to eat a fruit on a bench since she is sick of this. Just as a new resident comes to greet her, Zoya alerts her to the approaching bird droppings. When the woman wonders how Zoya knew it, she replies that she's been using the caplets she found as a child to repeatedly live through the past week. She has already spoken to this woman, but every time she awakens in the hospital, her family treats her the same way. She has to pretend she didn't see her family's surprise birthday cake when they give it to her on the last day of the week. Her nose starts to bleed at that point, so she runs to the restroom to steal the caplet and reset time before vanishing completely. She saves the elderly woman from the bird feces the next time she sees her, but she keeps her secret. Zoya informs her mother that the rhino would perish by the end of the week when they watch the news about the last one-horned rhino on Earth making its way to Miami while she is visiting her mother. Zoya is so irritated that she fails to alert her mother about the bird excrement, when she still doesn't receive a response. Zoya, weary of the same old topic, turns to leave and unintentionally stumbles into Paula, dropping her belongings. When Zoya notices that Paula has been reading one of her old novels, she is taken aback and asks where she obtained it. Paula responds by pointing out that the retirement community has a library. Zoya discovers numerous books that were formerly hers because Sandra dropped them when she was younger because the majority of these books were donated by the inhabitants. Paula notes that she chose Zoya's book since she is a student and a lab technician for a university. Zoya appears to be taken home by Donald before she has a chance to speak further, and she takes the book with her. In the evening, Zoya laments the monotony and wonders if she will have a chance to survive if she brings back her old studies. Donald brings her to the living room for her surprise birthday cake because he believes it would be a waste of time for her to spend her final days in a lab. Zoya goes outside and phones Paula with the number from the book when her nose starts to bleed. She takes the caplet to start a new week, after promising to find her soon to accomplish something amazing. Upon awakening at the hospital, Zoya instructs Donald and Janie to sign the necessary documents as she prepares to leave. But, as soon as they leave, Zoya stealthily leaves the room, and since everyone is focused on the game, no one notices. She uses the fire exit to flee and hails a cab, telling the driver she would reimburse him when she gets home. A few minutes later, Zoya enters her home with the secret keys, and packs a suitcase with her clothes, books, and caps. She emerges from her change of clothing, ready to pay, but the cab has already left. She then visits Paula, but due to the reset, Paula doesn't know her. Paula doesn't think Zoya is telling the truth, so she hides her hand and asks how many fingers she's holding up to support her claims. Since Zoya obviously doesn't know the answer to the question, she resets the week and pays the taxi driver this time. The following time Paula tests Zoya's knowledge, she guesses a lot of things, including all the hand motions, the cat meowing, and the questions Paula asks, indicating that she has had this conversation a lot already. After coming to believe her, Paula offers to assist, and they head to the university where Zoya tells them she attempted to figure out how the caplets functioned 30 years ago, but had to give up due to personal circumstances. She is only allowed to ingest one caplet at a time. If she takes another one right away, nothing will happen because the previous one must first exit her system. With this experiment, she hopes to make changes in her life that will give her more time to pursue her dreams of greatness. Even though the lab and its equipment are outdated, they will suffice for the time being. According to Zoya, the caplets don't melt, burn, or disintegrate. It appears as though they are perpetually regenerating, and were never truly there in the first place. Lingering in a condition of suspended animation, Paula wants to examine the regeneration in order to dissect it, but Zoya draws attention to the fact that it is a subatomic process. Rather, she believes that students ought to attempt to duplicate it, just as she did when she was younger. Following a disagreement over the best course of action, Paula gets an idea and leaves the lab to seek assistance. Zoya ignores a call from Donald at that very moment. She tries to leave since she feels bad, but is startled to see her former university professor, Dulsberg. Upon welcoming her to his office, he is taken aback to discover Paula rummaging through his desk. Paula tells him that she's working with Zoya and that she's the only, kind of, student here, which confuses Zoya and causes him to stress out. Getting further enraged, Dulsberg puts all the blame on Zoya, recalling how he had been thrilled by her exam results and had assumed she would be a fantastic student, but that had turned out to be a lazy and entitled student. Paula tries to persuade Zoya not to take Dulsberg's remarks seriously after the women are ejected, but Zoya admits he was correct. She was indolent since she could pass the test by running back in time. Then Paula displays the box, a nanoscopic man, that she took from the professor's office. A human was successfully shrunk during an experiment, but the process couldn't be stopped, hence the shrinking continues to this day. The pair heads to a cool dry aging area to work with him, because ambient temperature could introduce mold and bacteria into the box. For this man, 100 years is but a few seconds in the everyday world. Paula plugs in the box because the man can send and receive messages on a little screen thanks to a transmitter hidden in his costume. Since his outfit contains a particle detector as well, they drop a capelet into a box so he can examine it. The small display and attached computer show a ton of weird code when the capelet rattles for a short while. After taking a look at it, Paula affirms that Zoya is correct. The capelet is always shifting, going through a variety of configurations. When the day is over, Zoya stays at Paula's and tells her story of finding the bottle of capelets while strolling around a golf field. When she was 12 years old, she took it because it had her name on it even though it was just lying there. She heard a voice stating, "You'll change the world," even though no one else was in the area. Over the next few days, the pair continues attempting various approaches to comprehend capelets, but they don't get very far, especially because the outdated technology keeps malfunctioning. In order to recruit Paula and begin over, Zoya must reset the week several times and leave the hospital each time. Zoya returns home to live with her family after a few resets. When Janet becomes anxious about having to teach music to children instead of pursuing her dream of becoming a composer, Zoya advises her to play in her spare time until she receives her big break. This is based on her own early years, as Zoya used to assure her father that she would follow in his footsteps and become a scientist. Both resets and research continue to take place. The two aren't moving forward, and Zoya worries that she won't be able to achieve despite having all the time in the world. She finds out what really happened to her one morning before Zoya comes to recruit Paula. Turns out that the professor she was meant to work with abruptly took a leave of absence, and she was unable to select a new one in time for this year. After numerous restarts, Paula and Zoya talk about different possibilities, while they wait for a small explosion to occur in the lab. Paula finds it odd that Zoya's research never received funding in the past, so Zoya acknowledges that unlike her peers, she did not enroll in a science program in Europe after graduating. When Donald remarked, to be sure it would make her happy, Zoya realized that her true motivation wasn't to enjoy experimenting, but rather to figure out the capelets. When Paula inquires about her previous research, Zoya recollects that it was left behind with her mother's belongings. Zoya takes the capelet to start the week anew as her nose begins to bleed at that same moment. They visit the senior community to look through her mother's old boxes, after she goes through the customary recruiting process with Paula. Sandra saved her own psychology papers and a newspaper item about Mark, Zoya's former partner, conducting research at NASA, but she did not save any of her daughter's assignments. As Zoya is contemplating her next move, a nurse informs her that Donald is out there, looking for her, with tears in his eyes. But by the time Zoya tries to follow him, he's disappeared. While returning, Zoya reflects on the day she informed Donald that she would not be participating in the Europe program. He advised her to pursue her true happiness only after she stated she had no intention of changing her mind, even though he had really wanted her to go because it was a fantastic chance. After a few restarts, Zoya is feeling the effects of the absence of emotional support. It's becoming harder for her to constantly leave her family behind as she misses them. Zoya wonders if her family is simply waiting for her to arrive while they continue to prepare the surprise cake. In the meantime, her family keeps making preparations. After hundreds more resets, Zoya declares they've finally done everything, and there's no use in trying again. Realizing she's been caught in another boring routine, Paula is certain that they should not give up, and advises Zoya to approach Mark for assistance. Nonetheless, Zoya is content to remain with her family. Paula is the one who loses her cool now, pointing out that she jeopardized her career and pilfered a young man for a woman who walked up at her flat one morning. Paula runs out of room, after admitting that she too wants to go back in time and make her life right. After she leaves, Paula hands Zoya back caplets. She was concerned that taking one might result in her body developing a black hole, as well, so she dared not take one. Paula wants to return since, at the age of 15, she drove over a nail in her parents' automobile without permission. Without saying anything, she returned the car, assuming the parents would discover the nail and take it out. But because they were blind, the tire burst up, killing them. Declaring she will locate Mark, Zoya says she wants to aid Paula. Zoya reveals that evening that she discovered the caplets a week after her father passed away. She attempted to return to save him, but each time she woke up a day later. When Zoya says she didn't turn out to be as amazing as her father had hoped, Paula reminds her that she authored a lot of books, which is a significant accomplishment. Zoya's nose bleeding breaks the moment, and she leaves Paula's room, resetting the week. When Zoya wakes up, she gets ready and heads to visit Dulsberg rather than herself. She goes off on a tirade about his opinions of her and acknowledges that she might be impatient or lazy at times, but at least she's trying, and she needs Mark to help her go forward right now. Dulsberg offers her Mark's address, impressed. After that, Zoya heads to the airport and muses over her last encounter with Mark as she waits for her flight. Both of them attended the class reunion, and because they were from different backgrounds, their conversation had been extremely awkward. In fact, Zoya thought Mark had made derogatory remarks. When Zoya eventually arrives at Mark's residence, his son Chris answers the door and breaks the sad news that Mark has passed away. His health was severely damaged since he worked non-stop without eating or sleeping. When Zoya is brought to Mark's office, she is startled to discover her own old notes, among all of his studies and accolades. Since Chris simply wanted a father, Mark has always claimed that his work would make his son proud, which is why Chris acknowledges that he despises that room. Then, to console him, Zoya gives him a hug. Shortly after, Zoya discovers that she used to write Donald's name on the pages of her previous studies. After giving their previous dating days some thought and realizing what matters most to her, she decides to listen to all of the voicemails. With every communication, Joyce and Donald seem more and more frantic since they are unable to locate her. In the final ones, they are sobbing and pleading with her to return because they don't want her to pass away without having one final glimpse of her. When Zoya looks down and notices the black hole developing in her chest, she breaks down. Her nose is gushing. In a frantic attempt to turn back time, she looks for her caplets. Zoya rushes out of her room to give her daughter a hug and an apology as soon as she wakes up. She acts friendlier and willingly joins the chat on the way home. That evening, she gets personal with Donald and asks him if they've had a happy life. He answers without hesitation, yes. Over the next few days, Zoya exhibits more energy when engaging in family activities. She brings Donald to the massage parlor so they can hold hands as she writes her will, adding a note directing her to donate all of her books to the retirement home. She also enjoys a wonderful day at the beach with her family. She takes Sandra to view the rhino before it passes away when she pays her a visit. During her final visit, Paula receives the caplets and Zoya's research. She understands that being great is understanding when to stop pursuing fame and instead pass your work on to the following generation. Later, Paula discovers a small note in the journal that provides her with Princeton support person information. Zoya cheerfully shares her birthday cake with her family that evening. She stays in the room and doesn't bleed from her nose this time, so Jane brings her a gift. According to Jane, the ultrasound indicates that she is expecting a child, whom they plan to name Zoya. Zoya gives her daughter a happy cry and pulls away when her nose starts to bleed. She gives Donald a kiss and expresses her regret for not being there for him all the time before declaring her love for him. All of a sudden, the clock continues to tick while the scene freezes. In a strange blur that symbolizes her death, Zoya vanishes and then resurfaces in the past, speaking to her younger self, the things she heard when she picked up the bottle.